Welcome back. This true story, sent by viewer Vivian Holloway, reveals how she used hidden cameras and pure intellect to fight back when her family tried to steal her life. If you have a story of betrayal and triumph, email us at womenstoriessigmail.com. Get ready for the grandson. Pushed me down the stairs. The porcelain, not convenient to name brand, ceramic plate shattered across my polished, not convenient to name brand, hardwood floor, its delicate, hand-painted floral pieces scattering like shrapnel. This plate, depicting a stylized rhododendron, had been carried by my own mother in her suitcase when she emigrated from the Netherlands to America in the 1950s. It was the only tangible piece connecting me to my maternal grandmother, whom I'd never met. Now it lay destroyed at the feet of my 12-year-old grandson, Leo, his face wearing that unsettling, almost vacant half-smile that I had grown to instinctively distrust. "Oops," Leo muttered flatly, his pale eyes holding mine, daring me to challenge him. My son, Marcus, barely glanced up from the glow of his not-convenient-to-name brand phone. He was seated on the plush sofa, theoretically reviewing a client brief, but realistically scrolling through social media. "It's just an old plate, Mom. Just a plate." "Just a plate," I repeated, the tightness in my throat making my voice sound brittle. "Like your grandmother was just an immigrant who carried it across an ocean. Like my mother was just an academic who refused to sell it when I was trying to fund your private schooling." I used the word just like a weapon, though it glanced harmlessly off his professional armor. "Leo needs clearer boundaries, Marcus," I insisted later during dinner, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "This behavior isn't normal." My once elegant Victorian home, located in the prosperous Queen Anne neighborhood of Seattle, had become a daily battleground since I'd invited Marcus's family to live upstairs 5 years ago, shortly after my husband, Richard, passed away. The grief had been overwhelming, and the thought of an empty house had been unbearable. Now, the thought of a full, chaotic house was worse. I, Vivian Holloway, aged 68, Professor Emerita of European History, felt my authority dissolve daily. "He's been vandalizing neighborhood property," I pressed, pushing past my initial complaint. "Mr. Davies saw him slashing his prize-winning rhododendron bushes with a utility knife. That kind of destructive tendency is worrying. That old man is senile and needs to mind his own, not convenient to name brand business," Serena snapped, my daughter-in-law, her perfect blonde bob barely moving. "And you need to stop actively trying to find things to criticize about my parenting, Vivian." Marcus, forever the non-confrontational middleman, offered his usual sacrifice of truth for peace. He smiled weakly, a miserable little twitch of the lips. "Let's just enjoy dinner, okay?" The silence that followed was thick with unspoken tension, a silence that had become the soundtrack to my declining years. Later that evening, the strain of the day weighing heavily on my 68-year-old frame, I carried my tea tray upstairs. My rheumatoid arthritis made each step on the beautifully curved mahogany staircase a deliberate, painful ascent. My mind was already planning my work for the next day, revising my manuscript on 19th-century European port cities and their trade in not-convenient-to-name brand spices. A welcome distraction from the toxic domestic reality. The staircase felt like a mountain, a symbol of the immense effort it took to simply exist in my own home. As I reached the top landing, my foot hovering over the final step, a small, menacing figure emerged from the deep shadows, cast by the hallway's, not convenient to name brand, antique gaslight fixture. "Nobody believes you anyway," Leo whispered, his face illuminated eerily by the dim light filtering from the kitchen below. There was a cold, calculating intensity in his eyes that was terrifying, a level of malice far too advanced for a 12-year-old. He had learned the power of the lie from his parents. Before I could even register the threat, I felt a sharp, deliberate push against my back. It was forceful, targeted, and decisive. The tea tray flew forward, the porcelain cup spinning in the air as I tumbled backward, my body utterly helpless against the brutal tug of gravity. Each carved stair edge bit into my flesh and bones as I bounced down the flight. The sickening, immediate crack of bone in my left wrist sent a blinding, white-hot lance of pain shooting up my arm. The world dissolved into a kaleidoscope of pain and mahogany. "Mom!" Marcus shouted, his voice laced with sudden, genuine panic, rushing from the kitchen. Through the tears that blurred my vision and the sheer, raw agony that enveloped me, I managed to articulate the truth. He pushed me. Leo pushed me on purpose. Marcus and Serena exchanged a glance over my crumpled body that wasn't one of concern, but rather of immediate, synchronized exasperation. Serena, kneeling next to me, actually rolled her eyes, a dismissive, weary gesture that instantly solidified the narrative they were about to construct. "Don't be so dramatic, Vivian," she sighed, her tone heavy with martyrdom. "Leo says you tripped. Accidents happen at your age. That tea tray was too heavy for you anyway." I watched my grandson peek around the corner of the staircase, that same smug, unsettling half-smile playing on his lips, confirming my worst fears. He knew he was safe. "I know what happened," I insisted, my voice a ragged whisper as I cradled my shattered wrist against my chest. Marcus helped me to my feet, his haste ungentle, his anxiety focused more on the potential liability and the mess than on my actual injury. "Mom, maybe this is a sign we should consider other living arrangements somewhere with, not convenient to name brand, professional care. You've been confused lately, imagining things. You're becoming a danger to yourself." As they drove me to the not convenient to name brand regional medical center in their silent, expensive, not convenient to name brand sedan. A cold, painful realization settled into my bones, a realization far more devastating than my broken wrist. My family wasn't merely disbelieving me, they were actively and strategically conspiring against me. In their manufactured reality, I was now nothing more than a confused old woman, a disposable and inconvenient obstacle standing between them and the substantial inheritance they considered to be rightfully theirs. The white plaster cast encasing my wrist felt less like a medical aid and more like a shackle, a constant suffocating reminder of my sudden, brutal helplessness and my son's ultimate, devastating betrayal. The esteemed Professor Emerita, the expert in not convenient to name brand historical archives, had been reduced to an inconvenient piece of damaged property. I knew with chilling certainty that this was just the beginning of their plan. The pain was their alibi, the confusion was their weapon. The cast felt cold and heavy. 2 weeks after the incident, the accident, as Marcus and Serena rigidly insisted on calling it, I shuffled cautiously through the corridors of my own home. My once revered Victorian property, with its tall ceilings and beautiful crown molding, now felt like a gilded cage. I was confined primarily to the ground floor, my mobility severely limited by the bulky plaster around my left wrist. The pain, though dulled by not convenient to name brand medication, was a constant, throbbing presence, a physical manifestation of the psychic wound inflicted by my family. I began noticing small, unsettling displacements in my bedroom, the subtle, passive aggression of gaslighting. My antique, not convenient to name brand, mahogany jewelry box, a wedding gift from Richard, was slightly ajar one morning, its velvet lining disturbed. A small stack of sentimental family photos, including one of my late husband and me on our sailing trip to the not convenient to name brand coast, had been subtly rearranged. The worn, leather-bound journal where I'd been meticulously charting my not convenient to name brand research memoirs on European trade routes, a 40-year project, had been moved from its customary spot on my writing desk to a crowded bookshelf, obscured behind a collection of ancient, not convenient to name brand history textbooks. I wasn't suffering from cognitive decline. I was being actively, systematically sabotaged. They were creating the very confusion they claimed to be worried about, establishing a false paper trail for the institutionalization they craved. Need anything, Mom? Marcus hovered in my doorway, his posture betraying a superficial concern that barely masked his underlying impatience. His anxiety wasn't about my comfort, but about my compliance. He was waiting for me to break, to admit I couldn't handle myself anymore. "I'm fine, thank you," I murmured, the lie tasting like bitter chalk in my mouth. I dared not show any sign of distress or independence, lest they seize the opportunity. After he retreated, I cautiously pushed yesterday's newspaper aside with my cast-encased hand. Peeking out from underneath was a glossy brochure for a highly rated, not convenient to name brand, assisted living facility in Tacoma, a place renowned for its memory care. The pamphlet had been placed there with surgical precision, subtle, deniable, and absolutely deliberate. That afternoon, I acted. My first call was not to a doctor or a lawyer, but to Bethany, my oldest friend from my graduate school days. Bethany, at 72, was a technophile, a self-proclaimed digital wizard who embraced technology with a youthful fervor I had always found slightly bewildering, yet admirable. Now her technical expertise became my unexpected lifeline. "They think I'm going senile, Bethany," I whispered into the phone, huddled near the antique armoire to minimize the risk of being overheard in my own home. "They're staging evidence." Bethany arrived the next day, not empty-handed, but bearing a collection of deceptively innocuous decorative items: a chunky, vintage, not convenient to name brand clock, an overly detailed stone bookend, and a small, brightly colored picture frame. "Military grade, darling," she whispered, her eyes gleaming with unexpected, thrilling glee. "My nephew works in, not convenient to name brand, industrial security. Each piece contains a tiny, high-definition camera with motion activation and cloud storage. Untraceable on standard Wi-Fi networks. The adrenaline that coursed through me was intoxicating, instantly eclipsing the fatigue and pain. That night, my hands trembled as I worked, not from the frailty of age, but from the terrible, gut-wrenching suspicion of the truths I was about to confirm. We placed the decorative items strategically: the clock on my bedroom mantelpiece, the bookend on the high shelf overlooking the kitchen entrance, and the picture frame discreetly positioned in the common hallway near the staircase. We linked the feeds to a secure tablet Bethany had configured, a silent, vigilant witness to the betrayal unfolding around me. The next morning, reviewing the footage on the secure tablet, I witnessed the first phase of their conspiracy. The playback showed Leo slipping into my room just after dawn. He moved with a chilling, practiced stealth, a shadow expertly navigating the sleeping house. He went immediately for my jewelry box, ignoring the small costume pieces and zeroing in on my sapphire drop earrings, Richard's last Christmas gift, before his sudden heart attack 5 years ago. Leo's small fingers extracted the earrings, their blue luster catching the faint morning light. But the true, heart-stopping shock came hours later. The hallway camera footage showed Serena inspecting the earrings in the kitchen. She held them up, nodding approvingly at their quality before smoothly pocketing them. "Good eyes, sweetie," she told Leo, ruffling his hair with a casualness that spoke volumes about their long-established partnership. "These are worth at least $1,000 at the not-convenient-to-name brand luxury consignment store." My breath caught painfully in my chest. This wasn't just opportunism. It was an orchestrated generational campaign of theft and manipulation. Over the next week, the silent cameras revealed the full, ugly scope of their operation. Leo regularly invaded my space, not just stealing items of monetary value, but also those of profound sentimental worth. The camera over the kitchen entrance revealed Marcus's complicity. He accidentally spilled a cup of coffee onto the printed draft of my 40-year research manuscript on women poets of the Victorian era. The stain was large, deliberate, and ruined pages of irreplaceable marginalia. The hallway camera showed Serena moving my prescription pill bottles, claiming I had misplaced them myself when I later couldn't find them, forcing me to call my pharmacy in a panic. The final straw came during Sunday brunch. Leo had brought his classroom's pet, not convenient to name brand, hamster home for the weekend. The hidden camera I'd risked placing in the second-floor bathroom captured the most appalling act: Leo holding the terrified, struggling creature underwater in the sink. His expression was disturbingly detached, curious rather than cruel, as if the drowning were merely an interesting scientific experiment. When the small animal ceased struggling, Serena calmly walked into the bathroom. "We'll tell Mrs. Evans it escaped during feeding," she said, helping Leo dispose of the evidence with the cool efficiency of a seasoned criminal. That night, my rage was no longer hot or tearful. It was cold, crystalline, and absolute. I overheard them through my slightly ajar bedroom door. "The house would sell for at least $1.2 million in this Seattle market," Serena whispered, her voice low and greedy. "Plus, whatever's left of her savings and investments, and Leo's college fund." "Almost $350,000 now," Marcus added, his voice tinged with greed. "She's not going to need any of it in a not-convenient-to-name brand nursing home," Serena replied with chilling finality. I closed my eyes. In that moment, Vivian Holloway, widow, Professor Emerita, mother and grandmother, died. And someone new, someone with nothing left to lose, equipped with cold, hard evidence, was born in her place. The physical pain of my healing wrist still throbbed, but it was the dull, manageable ache of a healing fracture. The internal pain, the agony of realizing my family intended to dispose of me, was a far greater burden. The constant, intrusive presence of Marcus and Serena had morphed from annoying to actively threatening. "The pain still bothers you, Mrs. Holloway?" Dr. Chen, my orthopedic surgeon, replacing Dr. Sheldon, asked, examining the cast and my swelling during my follow-up appointment. He was young, meticulous, and had keen eyes that seemed to absorb every detail of my demeanor. "The physical pain is manageable, doctor," I replied carefully, ensuring my tone was calm and neutral. My heart hammered with the fierce desire to tell him everything, to present the evidence, to scream the truth, but I restrained myself. What tangible action could he take? Call the authorities. Without concrete, verified proof, it would simply be my word, the word of the confused old woman, against the united, professional front of my son and daughter-in-law. A contest I knew I would lose immediately in the court of public or institutional opinion. "Mrs. Holloway, is everything truly all right at home? You seem unusually tense, and your recovery rate is slower than expected for this type of fracture." "I'm fine," I said automatically, the reflex of self-protection kicking in. I was an expert at performing roles. I just hadn't realized I would be forced to perform the most tragic one in my own life. As I gathered my not-convenient-to-name brand purse to leave the not-convenient-to-name brand medical clinic, Dr. Chen handed me a business card. "This is Laura Hayes. She's a social worker specializing in elder rights and navigating family conflict, particularly in complex inheritance situations. She's exceptional and completely confidential." "I don't need—" "Just take it," he interrupted gently, his gaze conveying a deep, non-judgmental concern. Sometimes talking to an impartial professional helps more than we realize. There are resources available, Vivian, if you need them. I slipped the card into the inner pocket of my coat. It felt heavy and strangely reassuring. A small piece of external reality, a tether to sanity in my self-contained nightmare. 3 days later, after Serena had helpfully suggested I sign a power of attorney, POA document, over to Marcus, just in case of further accidents or cognitive setbacks, I found myself in Laura Hayes's office. The room was not sterile or corporate. It was warm, filled with vibrant, not convenient to name brand, potted plants and mismatched but comfortable chairs, a true sanctuary designed to disarm the vulnerable. Laura Hayes was a middle-aged woman with kind, direct eyes and a calm, reassuring demeanor. "Elder abuse takes many forms, Mrs. Holloway," she began, her voice factual and non-judgmental. "Financial exploitation is statistically far more common than outright physical abuse. It's often carried out by those closest to the victim." "I'm not being abused," I protested weakly, the denial a stubborn habit forged over years of minimizing my own pain and avoiding confrontation with my son. Laura's smile was gentle, but knowing. "Then why are you here, Vivian? And why did Dr. Chen insist you call?" That simple, honest question, the kind of piercing query a true professional uses to cut through evasion, broke something vital inside me. The truth, ugly, meticulous, and accompanied by the secure, time-stamped recordings from my tablet, poured out. I recounted Leo's escalating cruelty, Serena's calculated manipulation, Marcus's devastating, profitable indifference, the gaslighting attempts, the pill tampering, the deliberate coffee spill on my manuscript, and the $350,000 college fund they were already openly treating as their own. "I've lost everything," I concluded, the raw emotion finally escaping. "My dignity, my safety, my home, and my purpose as a historian and academic." "Not yet. You haven't," came a calm, authoritative voice from the doorway. A tall, silver-haired woman stood there. She had impeccable posture and radiated the kind of quiet, formidable confidence I had once possessed in my lecture halls at the not-convenient-to-name brand university. "Vivian, this is Joyce Miller," Laura introduced us. "She leads our peer support group for older adults dealing with family conflict and exploitation. She's been where you are." Joyce sat beside me, taking my trembling, cast-encased hands in her steady ones. "2 years ago, my daughter and her husband attempted to commit me to a not-convenient-to-name brand, specialized memory care facility for the crime of refusing to sell my property to fund their failing, not-convenient-to-name brand software startup. I was deemed unfit because I chose not to bankroll their irresponsibility. "What did you do?" I asked, completely captivated, my pain momentarily forgotten. Joyce's smile was fierce and unforgettable. I reminded them that a diagnosis of old age is not a crime, and that being underestimated is a temporary condition. That afternoon, I attended my first support group meeting. The atmosphere was immediately therapeutic. The stories stunned me. Educated, accomplished individuals being systematically stripped of their agency by the very people they loved and trusted. It was a silent epidemic of betrayal fueled by greed and denial. Joyce introduced me to Thomas Vance, a silver-haired attorney who specialized specifically in elder law, known for his relentless pursuit of justice for his senior clients in the Seattle area. "Your case is tragically common, Vivian," Thomas said during our initial consultation in his impressive paneled office. "But it contains uncommon, irrefutable elements that work significantly in our favor. Specifically, the video surveillance evidence and the college fund structure." "Tell me about its origins," Thomas prompted. I explained that my first husband, James, Marcus's father, had established the fund before his untimely death when Marcus was 14. My second husband, Richard, had continued contributing to it. The fund now contained nearly $350,000, and I was the sole trustee holding the legal power. Thomas leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Here is what they don't know, Vivian. Legally, that money is designated for educational purposes. However, as sole trustee, you possess considerable legal latitude in how those educational purposes are defined and executed, especially given the child's documented behavioral issues." For the first time since the night on the stairs, I felt a spark of something beyond fear. It wasn't quite hope, but its far more dangerous and empowering cousin: possibility. The possibility of fighting back on my terms, using my legal intelligence instead of my failing physical strength. "They think you're deteriorating mentally," Thomas clarified, reviewing the notes from my conversation with Laura Hayes. "That's what they're telling everyone," I confirmed, pushing the assisted living brochure Serena had planted across his oak desk. "They're using manufactured confusion to justify their theft." "Perfect," Thomas affirmed, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "Now we move to phase 2, strategic compliance." The strategy was simple, elegant, and chillingly effective in its psychological manipulation. I would appear to be declining exactly as Marcus and Serena expected. I would become slightly more forgetful, a bit more dependent, occasionally confused about dates or names. This carefully curated facade was crucial. It gave them the false sense of confidence they needed to accelerate their plan, and crucially, to make mistakes that Thomas Vance and I could exploit. People only truly reveal themselves when they think they're winning, Joyce Miller had advised me during one of our now regular, discreet coffee meetings at the not-convenient-to-name brand Waterfront Cafe. They become careless when they believe the target is neutralized. I implemented the plan immediately. At breakfast the next morning, I feigned confusion over the day of the week, insisting it was Tuesday when it was clearly Wednesday. When Serena mentioned an upcoming not-convenient-to-name brand school event for Leo, a mandatory parent-teacher conference, I appeared momentarily bewildered. A conference? For little Leo? But he's always been so compliant in class, hasn't he? I murmured, letting my voice trail off vaguely, implying I had forgotten his known behavioral issues. Mom's definitely losing ground, I overheard Marcus tell Serena that night, the initial alarm in his voice quickly replaced by a calculating edge of resolve. Maybe we should accelerate our timeline for the property appraisal and get the POA signed immediately. The longer we wait, the more her funds will be wasted on unnecessary therapy. Their timeline, my opening, The next morning, under the guise of an extended physical therapy appointment for my wrist at the not convenient to name brand rehabilitation center, I met with Robert Chen, my financial advisor for 20 years. Robert, a meticulous man in his late 50s, had managed my substantial portfolio since Richard passed away. Someone has been attempting to gain repeated access to your primary investment accounts, Vivian, Robert confirmed gravely, sliding a printout across his mahogany desk. Using your social security number and claiming to have power of attorney, POA status. They even tried calling, claiming they were helping you manage your growing confusion and suggesting a large withdrawal to simplify things. My son, Marcus, I said flatly, the admission no longer stinging, but serving as a cold, hard fact. Robert's expression hardened instantly. We denied access, of course, and flagged the attempts. My first duty is to you, Vivian, and your instructions were clear. No unscheduled withdrawals and no third-party access. Under Thomas Vance's legal guidance, I began the complex, multi-layered process of quietly restructuring my assets. Nothing dramatic enough to raise immediate red flags with the bank or with Marcus, who was still monitoring my main checking account. Just enough to secure the vast majority of what was mine. We moved the bulk of the liquid investments into an irrevocable, not convenient to name brand trust, the terms of which were entirely confidential, leaving only a small, easily manageable amount in my primary checking account to maintain my daily performance of manageable decline. Meanwhile, at home, I leaned further into my role as the dependent, slightly confused invalid. When Serena suggested I sign some routine paperwork, actually a waiver for the home insurance policy that would name Marcus as the primary beneficiary, I smiled vaguely and promised to look at it after my nap or when my vision clears up. When Marcus mentioned selling off some of my more valuable, not convenient to name brand antique furniture to simplify my life and prepare for the move, I appeared to genuinely consider the idea. You're making it almost too easy, Mom, Marcus said suspiciously after one such conversation, a flicker of doubt and perhaps even a residual trace of guilt crossing his face. I'm just tired of fighting, dear, I replied, infusing my voice with a crushing, world-weary sense of defeat. It's all too much for me now. You know what's best for your old mother, don't you? The flicker of guilt was momentary, instantly replaced by a hard, greedy resolution. He was a man performing the necessary moral calculus to justify his actions, prioritizing his family's financial security, at my expense, over his own conscience. That night, Leo's cruelty escalated to a new, physically dangerous level. As I reached for my not convenient to name brand blood pressure medication, a critical drug prescribed by my primary care physician, I found the bottle completely empty. Looking for these? Leo stood in my doorway, dangling the pill bottle in his small, grubby hand. His eyes, usually vacant, now gleamed with triumphant, malicious anticipation. Old people take too many drugs. That's what Mom says. She says you should be on the other kind, the quiet kind, he recited, mimicking Serena's dismissive tone perfectly. Leo, please, I whispered, panic constricting my throat. I need those. They regulate my heart. I need them now. Say please again, like you're begging, he demanded, his lips curving into that chilling, pitiless half-smile. That moment crystallized everything. This wasn't just about the money or the house. They were systematically destroying me, using slow, calculated methods. Leo through deliberate psychological cruelty and interference with my health. Serena through calculated manipulation. And Marcus through the most devastating weapon of all, indifference. They were actively trying to manage me out of my own life, using my physical frailty as leverage. Later, alone in my room, I studied an old, faded photograph from my teaching days. In it, a confident woman with clear, direct eyes and perfect posture stood before a large lecture hall, commanding respect without demanding it. That woman was me. Taking a deep, stabilizing breath, I called the private, encrypted number Joyce Miller had given me for emergencies. "It's time," I said simply, my voice now completely devoid of any feigned weakness or elderly tremor. "They've escalated. They tried to interfere with my critical medication." "We're ready, Vivian," Joyce replied instantly, her tone calm and steady, like an anchor in a storm. "The documents are prepared. The question is, are you ready to execute the final steps?" The gravity of the decision weighed on me, heavier than any plaster cast. I sat in Thomas Vance's oak-paneled office, surrounded by the quiet competence of generations of legal practice. The window offered a panoramic view of the not-convenient-to-name brand city skyline, a stark contrast to the small, dark drama unfolding in my home. The pain from the medication tampering had hardened my resolve. There was no turning back now. "The strategy is contingent on your complete legal authority as trustee," Thomas clarified, pushing a stack of meticulously compiled documents toward me. "The new name for foundation, the Vivian Holloway. Scholars Initiative is officially established as a restricted educational fund. It is designed to aid two distinct populations: high-achieving students from low-income families and seniors seeking continuing education after significant life upheaval." "And the $350,000? I asked, needing to hear the finality one last time. "That entire sum, the principal of Leo's college fund, will be irrevocably transferred into the Scholars Initiative upon your signature. This transfer is legally ironclad. Once signed, Marcus and Serena will have no claim to it, regardless of any future power of attorney they might manage to force you to sign." I stared at the papers. This was not just a financial transaction. It was my declaration of independence, a preemptive strike against the financial exploitation they had been plotting. It was also the calculated destruction of the future they had already claimed as their own. My hand trembled slightly, not from doubt, but from the immense weight of the moment, the severing of the final financial tie to my son's family. "I'm ready," I confirmed, taking the pen. I signed, channeling the fierce resolve of the woman in the faded photograph, the professor who commanded respect. Later that afternoon, Thomas gave me specific instructions for Phase 3. The catalyst. "They think you're mentally deteriorating. They need to believe it's happening rapidly now," he instructed. "We need to give them a reason to panic, something immediate that forces their hand. They must think their timeline has collapsed." With Bethany's technical assistance, we had spent the past week secretly performing the Great Purge. Under the cover of my confusion, we had systematically removed my most precious, irreplaceable possessions from the house: the remaining journals, the family photo albums, the jewelry that Jason had missed, and critical documents. These were safely stored at Joyce Miller's small cottage outside the city limits. Now came the final piece of preparation. While Marcus and Serena were out at not-convenient-to-name brand weekend appointments, I planted the fabricated proof. I carefully placed a modified bank statement on my writing desk, clearly showing a large, unauthorized withdrawal, a sum significant enough to trigger immediate financial alarm, to an unnamed private account. Then I left. I informed Marcus I was going to my grief therapy appointment, which was actually a final debriefing with Laura Hayes and Joyce. You will return and act completely normal, Laura advised. Don't confirm or deny the statement. Let the seed of doubt grow. When I returned home, the fabricated bank statement was gone from my desk, exactly as predicted. The bait had been taken. That night, the expected sound of hushed, heated argument drifted down the hallway from Marcus and Serena's bedroom. How could she withdraw that much without us knowing? Serena hissed, her voice sharp with panic. You're supposed to have eyes on the bank accounts. I don't know, Marcus replied, sounding defeated. The bank won't tell me anything. They keep saying I don't have authorization. You know they denied the POA access we tried to push through last week. You're her son. What about the confusion angle? Can't we use that to reverse it? I tried. They want formal medical evaluations, documentation proving incompetency from multiple specialists. We haven't pushed that hard yet. Then get them. That money is for Leo's future, our future. I lay in bed, listening to them plot and panic. The fear that had gripped me for months was finally replaced by a chilling, deep calm. They had shown me exactly who they were. They were frantic thieves, and they had just fallen into my trap. The following morning at breakfast, a tense, silent affair, Serena couldn't contain herself any longer. She began with manufactured saccharine concern. Vivian, dear, she started, her voice unnaturally sweet. Marcus noticed some unusual activity in your accounts, very large withdrawals. We're worried someone might be taking advantage of you. You know, given the recent confusion. I blinked, presenting the perfect picture of elderly bewilderment. Withdrawals? Oh my. I don't remember making any withdrawals. Do I need to call someone? Exactly. See, she can't even remember. Marcus jumped in, relief evident in his voice. Mom, maybe I should start handling your finances for safety, just until you're better. I frowned, struggling as if to grasp a slippery thought. But I did move some money recently. That specific education fund for Leo's college. I had to ensure it was properly used, didn't I? The temperature in the room plummeted instantly. Serena set down her coffee cup with a sharp, brittle clink. What about Leo's college fund? Her voice had lost all pretense of concern, turning hard and predatory. I donated it, I said simply, meeting her stare with the calm authority of a woman who had just signed her final lecture note. I transferred it to a wonderful educational foundation, the Scholars Initiative. They help bullying victims and seniors pursuing continuing education. Isn't that a lovely purpose? The silence that followed was deafening, the sound of shattered dreams hitting the highly polished hardwood floor. Marcus paled visibly while Serena's face contorted with barely contained pure fury. The war had officially begun. What do you mean, donated? Serena practically shrieked, slamming her hand down on the antique pine table. You emptied it completely. That money was for Leo's education. And it still is for education, I replied calmly, setting down my teacup with meticulous care. My composure was my shield. Just not exclusively his. The Vivian Holloway. Scholars Initiative will now help many deserving students, especially those affected by, not convenient to name brand, emotional distress and seniors seeking reinvention. I ensured the funds would be used properly, something I became worried about after my recent accident. Their reactions were immediate, chaotic, and devastatingly revealing. Serena exploded in a torrent of accusations, her composure completely fractured. She called me selfish, delusional, and declared I had sabotaged their future out of malice. Marcus alternated between anger and a desperate, manipulative tone, appealing to my maternal guilt. Mom, how could you do this to your own grandson? You know how much that meant to his future, he pleaded, though his eyes betrayed pure financial shock, not hurt. Leo, caught in the crossfire of the implosion, finally showed his true, unvarnished nature. You ruined everything, you stupid old woman, he screamed, his face contorted with rage, the polite mask of the innocent grandson finally dropping. It was my money! It's taking forever for you to just die. I simply stood, looked at each of them, the enraged manipulator, the spineless betrayer, and the cruel child, and said softly, deliberately, "No, it wasn't your money. It was a conditional gift, an opportunity you collectively lost through your own actions and lack of basic human decency. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a bag to pack." Leaving them frozen in their moment of chaotic realization, I returned to my bedroom, where the small suitcase, packed and ready, stood by the door. With the fund irrevocably transferred to the Scholars Initiative, I began implementing the next critical phase of my plan, tying up all loose ends and securing the remaining evidence. Over the next few days, I subtly and carefully removed the very last remaining personal items from the house: documents, irreplaceable research notes, and small, sentimental mementos still untouched by Leo's thefts, and stored them at Joyce Miller's home. During this meticulous process of clearing out my antique desk, I discovered something disturbing tucked away in the lining of an old writing box. They were letters Marcus had written to his stepfather, Richard, years ago, complaining bitterly about how I was controlling, stifling his career, and never truly supported him. This was a complete, agonizing distortion of reality. I had sacrificed everything for him after his biological father died, working 2 jobs as a university lecturer and freelance consultant to put him through his expensive, not convenient to name brand degree. The letters proved his narrative of victimhood was long-standing and deeply ingrained. Even more disturbing were the medical records I unearthed in a separate file, confirming Leo had been diagnosed with conduct disorder, CD, a serious condition characterized by persistent antisocial behavior years earlier. The reports showed multiple doctors had recommended intensive, long-term therapy, but Serena had adamantly refused treatment, considering it an unnecessary stigma that might damage his social profile. They weren't just neglecting my welfare, they were actively damaging their son's future. The surveillance footage continued to capture increasingly incriminating scenes. One clip showed Leo deliberately breaking several framed family photographs in the living room, while Serena merely sighed and said, "Kids will be kids," before swiftly hiding the damage beneath a heavy throw rug. I continued my performance of cognitive decline, feigning forgetfulness and appearing confused about appointments. The strategy worked perfectly. Marcus and Serena relaxed their vigilance, consumed by panic over the lost money, and convinced I was no longer a coherent threat to their remaining plans for the house. During this time, I met secretly with Laura Hayes, who meticulously documented the signs of neglect, emotional abuse, and the intentional interference with my medication. We compiled a detailed dossier of the systematic cruelty I was enduring. "What if I'm wrong, Laura?" I confessed during one tearful meeting, a moment of profound vulnerability. What if they really care about me in their own way? What if I am destroying the family? Laura gently presented the compiled evidence, the video of the hamster, the stolen pills, the medical file. She replied with unwavering conviction. "Love is shown through actions, not through empty words or calculated neglect, Vivian. You deserve dignity, safety, and respect. You are not destroying the family. You are stopping them from destroying you." Strengthened by this support, I reconnected with former colleagues from my teaching days at the university. Many expressed genuine shock at my situation, having been told by Marcus that I had become reclusive by choice due to memory issues. Professor Simon Wells, a former student of mine now directing a creative writing program, was particularly outraged and offered immediate professional and personal assistance. As I finalized the legal and personal plans with my growing support network, Serena began to push more aggressively for me to sign the property transfer documents. When I calmly asked to consult an attorney first, she exploded. "Why do you need to complicate things?" she demanded, her voice rising to a frantic pitch. "Don't you trust your own son after everything we've done for you?" This outburst happened, crucially, in Laura Hayes's presence, whom Serena still believed was merely my elderly friend, Lola. With a professional witness present, I finally responded with the full force of my resurrected authority. "Trust is a two-way street, dear, and I believe that road has been closed for some time now." The shocked look on Serena's face confirmed it was time to execute the final, definitive phase of my plan. I was done performing. 2 months after the stair incident, and precisely 1 week after the irrevocable transfer of the college fund, I meticulously executed the next phase. I deliberately left a second, modified bank statement on my writing desk. This one suggested a large sum, though not the entire house value, had been transferred to a private personal savings account in my name. The amount was just high enough to cause extreme agitation, but not high enough to reveal the complete asset restructuring Robert Chen had performed. As expected, Serena found it during her morning tidy-up. That night, I overheard Serena and Marcus arguing heatedly in their bedroom. "This is insane! She's moving the equity piece by piece. We have to stop her, Marcus," Serena insisted, her voice tight with rising hysteria. "Confront her immediately about this new transfer." Marcus, however, was hesitant. "No, we can't push her too hard right now. We're so close to getting her into the not-convenient-to-name brand care facility. We need to maintain the pretense of concern. Otherwise, she'll call the police about the earlier incidents or worse, hire a real lawyer." "Who cares about a lawyer now? The money is disappearing. We need to accelerate the property transfer." The next morning at breakfast, their agitation was palpable. Marcus, attempting to sound casual, approached the subject. "Mom, I noticed you made some, transactions recently. Quite large ones. Are you sure you don't want me to help manage your finances? Just until you're feeling more stable?" I appeared confused, playing the part perfectly. "What transactions, dear? What exactly are you referring to? I don't remember making any large transfers." In the following days, I watched their growing desperation. They made frantic, whispered calls, clearly trying to trace the money's destination. Their behavior confirmed exactly what I had suspected. They had been monitoring my accounts without my permission, attempting to establish unauthorized financial surveillance. Finally, during a tense, silent dinner, Serena couldn't contain herself any longer. She pushed her not-convenient-to-name brand salmon aside. "Vivian, what happened to Leo's college fund? The bank says you emptied it completely. Where did the $350,000 go? You told us it was a donation, but we can't find a record of that specific foundation." I looked at them with innocent, elderly confusion, then slowly, deliberately lowered my fork. "Oh, that fund?" "Yes, I transferred it," I said, my voice gaining a strange, quiet clarity. "I was worried something might happen to me, like falling downstairs, and wanted to ensure the money would be used properly for a good cause." The silence that followed was total. Marcus seemed physically unable to move, his face the color of the untouched salmon. Serena's face was a mask of sheer volcanic fury. "What do you mean, transferred? Where?" she demanded, her voice rising to a shout. "That money was specifically earmarked for Leo's education. It was our security." "And it still is for education," I replied calmly, channeling the strength Joyce Miller had taught me to find. "But it is now administered through the Vivian Holloway Scholars Initiative. The foundation helps many deserving students, especially victims of emotional bullying, and seniors continuing their education." I believe I mentioned that. Their subsequent reactions were a symphony of self-exposure. Serena launched into a furious, high-pitched barrage of accusations and personal attacks. Marcus alternated between anger and pleading, demanding I call Robert Chen immediately to reverse the action. Leo, sensing the final, ultimate rupture, stood up and screamed his true feelings. "You ruined everything, you selfish, miserable old woman!" he yelled, his face contorted in a horrifying echo of his mother's rage. "It was my money! You have to die now!" I simply stood, drawing myself up to the full height that had once commanded attention in lecture halls. I looked directly at each of them, at the rage, the entitlement, and the profound, cultivated indifference. "No, Leo," I said softly, but with absolute finality. "It was never your money. It was a conditional gift, an opportunity that you, Marcus, and Serena forfeited through your collective actions and lack of basic humanity. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a bag to pack. I am leaving this home, leaving them in complete, shattered shock, their future suddenly dissolving before their eyes. I returned to my room, where a small, meticulously packed suitcase was already prepared. The first, irrevocable phase of my plan was complete. The final act of defiance was the beginning of my freedom. The next morning, I was gone. My room remained intact, except for the missing small personal items and a simple note left propped against a book. "Need time to think. Do not try to contact me." Initially, Marcus and Serena were not overly concerned, convinced I would return soon, apologetic and vulnerable. They even saw my sudden dramatic departure as an opportunity to accelerate their plan to quickly sell the house. But when days bled into a week, worry began to set in. Not for me, but for the tangible asset I represented. Marcus tried accessing my bank accounts, only to discover the passwords had been changed, and a security note added. Any unauthorized access attempts would result in immediate reporting to Not Convenient to Name Brand Law Enforcement and Adult Protective Services. Meanwhile, I was comfortably settled in a temporary apartment, arranged by Joyce Miller, just a few towns away from Seattle. From there, I began monitoring developments through trusted neighbors and the surveillance system Bethany helped maintain. The cameras captured the frantic reality. Serena and Marcus desperately searching my office for financial documents, and numerous useless visits from real estate agents, as no sale could legally proceed without my signature. The house was now a very expensive, very inconvenient trap. 2 weeks after my self-imposed departure, I executed the next critical phase of the plan. Thomas Vance, my attorney, sent a formal, certified letter to Marcus and Serena. The letter was not a plea, but a legal ultimatum. It notified them, in no uncertain terms, that they were in violation of the terms of our verbal housing agreement and had precisely 60 days to vacate the property. The document went further, citing substantial evidence of elder abuse, neglect, and attempted financial fraud. Evidence that would be presented to the appropriate authorities, including the Seattle Police Department's Specialized Elder Crimes Unit, if they failed to comply with the deadline. The document was meticulously backed by the time-stamped video footage, financial reports, and medical statements Laura Hayes had collected. The reaction, captured vividly by Bethany's cameras, was chaotic. and immediate. Serena was filmed in a rage, throwing decorative objects and screaming accusations, while Marcus appeared increasingly defeated, finally comprehending the immense severity of their legal and financial predicament. The realization that their mother had not only been mentally competent, but had strategically documented their every misstep, was a catastrophic blow. My story, carefully managed and discreetly circulated, began to spread through the affluent Queen Anne community. Former colleagues from the university's history department, led by Professor Simon Wells, replacing Professor Collins, discreetly shared my situation in influential social circles. Neighbors who had witnessed years of disrespectful behavior from Marcus and Serena, particularly the constant dismissiveness toward my health and the unchecked aggression of Leo, began openly expressing their indignation. The couple found themselves quickly isolated and socially ostracized. Desperate and cornered, Marcus made a fatal error. He reported me to the local authorities as a potentially confused, missing elderly person, hoping they would locate me and legally force my return to the care of my loving family. This attempt spectacularly backfired. Detective Maria Santos, replacing Detective Jenkins, a sharp, no-nonsense officer, received an envelope personally delivered by Thomas Vance's paralegal. The envelope contained the complete, damning dossier, the surveillance footage showing Leo's push, the pill tampering, the theft, and the hamster incident, alongside complete financial documentation demonstrating my competence and their systematic manipulation attempts. After a thorough but swift investigation, Detective Santos located me in my temporary apartment, not to force my return, but to confirm my well-being, verify the evidence, and offer additional formal police protection and support services. 3 weeks after my departure, I dispatched 3 highly impactful letters simultaneously. 1. To Marcus and Serena, a final legal ultimatum prepared by Thomas Vance, detailing their only 2 options: voluntarily vacate my house within the established time frame, 60 days, or face formal eviction proceedings, immediately accompanied by criminal charges of elder abuse and attempted fraud based on the existing evidence. 2. To Leo's school, the prestigious, not convenient to name brand, Preparatory Academy. I sent selected, non-confidential documentation of Leo's documented antisocial behavior, conduct disorder diagnosis, and his parents' refusal to seek therapeutic help. I requested a mandated professional psychological evaluation for the child's and his classmates' well-being, explicitly including evidence of the hamster incident and other concerning destructive behaviors, the vandalism. 3. To the ethics department of Marcus's company, a major, not convenient to name brand, tech firm. I discreetly submitted a formal inquiry questioning his unauthorized use of my personal intellectual property, academic work he had apparently incorporated into a recent internal marketing campaign without attribution or compensation, a clear violation of professional conduct rules. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. Within days, Marcus faced an internal disciplinary meeting at work regarding the ethics violation. Leo's school mandated a complete psychological evaluation as a non-negotiable condition for his continued enrollment. And Thomas Vance formally began legal proceedings to reclaim my property, filing the eviction notice. Serena, finally grasping the catastrophic seriousness of their situation, attempted a final, desperate diplomatic approach. She arranged a meeting through a mutual neutral acquaintance. During a tense lunch in a public, not convenient to name brand restaurant, she alternated wildly between emotional appeals and thinly veiled threats. "Destroying our family won't bring you the dignity you're seeking, Vivian," she argued, tears streaming down her face. "Think about how this will affect your reputation when people learn you abandoned your own grandson for money. I remained calm, unmoved, and utterly centered. My dear, I didn't destroy anything. I simply stopped rebuilding what you continuously demolished and stole. As for my reputation, perhaps you should be more concerned with your own? At the end of our meeting, Serena made a final, pathetic offer. She would immediately return all items Leo had stolen and promise to enroll him in mandatory therapy in exchange for withdrawing the eviction demands and criminal charges. I considered the offer momentarily, genuinely concerned about Leo's long-term welfare, despite everything. Then, I delivered my final, unyielding verdict. The problem, Serena, is that promises require trust, and some priceless, not convenient-to-name brand plates, once shattered, simply can't be glued back together. You lost your opportunity for good faith a long time ago. Marcus, facing serious professional repercussions due to the ethics investigation at his not-convenient-to-name brand tech firm, and finally beginning to comprehend the true gravity of his actions, attempted a different, seemingly more sincere contact. He sent me a lengthy handwritten letter, avoiding email or phone calls which could be monitored by Thomas Vance. In it, he partially admitted his mistakes, though he still blamed much of the initial greed and manipulation on the stress of raising a child with Leo's difficulties and the constant pressure from Serena. He framed himself as a victim of circumstances and undue influence. My response, drafted with Thomas's counsel, was brief, typewritten, and contained a single definitive truth. Growing up isn't optional, Marcus. It's necessary, and it usually happens when we face the consequences of our choices, not when we avoid them. The legal proceedings are continuing. As the 60-day eviction deadline approached, the family dynamics imploded completely. The cameras provided Vivian's support network with agonizing real-time proof of their disintegration. Marcus and Serena began blaming each other with explosive arguments that neighbors could clearly hear, shattering the thin veneer of their carefully constructed professional lives. Leo, sensing the total collapse of authority and left virtually unsupervised, intensified his destructive behavior, culminating in a severe incident at the not-convenient-to-name brand preparatory academy that resulted in his temporary suspension, pending the mandatory psychological evaluation. Observing from the safe, sterile distance provided by Joyce and my supportive network, I faced my own profound moral crisis. How far had my quest for justice and self-preservation veered into simple revenge? I had been systematically betrayed and abused, but was the total destruction of my son's home and marriage the only possible path? What was the ultimate emotional cost for everyone involved, including myself? I discussed this frequently with Laura Hayes, who had become less of a professional consultant and more of a trusted confidant. "You didn't destroy their lives, Vivian," Laura reassured me during one meeting in the quiet library of the temporary apartment complex. "You simply removed the foundation that allowed their toxic dynamic to continue: your wealth. They are destroying their own lives because they are now forced to face the reality of their choices, without your house as a buffer or your money as an escape route." 3 months after the stair incident, and following extensive legal proceedings, multiple terse hearings, and failed contestation attempts by Marcus and Serena to block the eviction, the final writ was executed. They were formally evicted from my beautiful Seattle Victorian home. They were forced to move into a much smaller, significantly less desirable apartment across town, drastically reducing their standard of living. The public humiliation was intense. Serena's small real estate consultation business suffered crippling losses when the full story, sanitized but clearly hinting at financial and familial misconduct, circulated through the elite social circles she relied upon. Marcus, Facing severe probation at work and a rapidly disintegrating marriage, finally sought mandatory therapy as a condition of his continued employment. There, he began confronting the toxic patterns dating back to his childhood. Patterns rooted not in any failing of mine, as he had long rationalized, but in his own inability to establish healthy boundaries, take adult responsibility, or resist the pressures of entitlement. Leo's mandatory psychological evaluation, compelled by the school and supported by the detailed evidence I provided, revealed an advanced conduct disorder, CD, requiring immediate, intense intervention. Reluctantly, Serena finally agreed to intensive therapeutic and residential intervention for her son, though she continued publicly blaming me, the cruel, unforgiving mother, for the trauma I had supposedly caused the family. Having reclaimed my house, I walked through the empty rooms for the first time alone. The victory felt strangely hollow. Although I had undeniably regained my autonomy, my dignity, and my physical safety, the price had been the permanent, surgical loss of any meaningful relationship with my son and grandson. The silence of the house, once suffocating, was now vast and echoing. Concerned about the direction my emotional life had taken, the cold, calculating nature that survival had demanded, I sought further counsel from Laura. "You have to mourn the relationship you thought you had, Vivian," Laura gently explained. "You did not fail. You simply responded to an existential threat. You didn't destroy your family. You simply stopped allowing them to destroy you. There's a crucial difference, and you must hold on to that distinction." During this period of profound reflection, I received an unexpected, surprising letter from Leo. Written under the therapeutic guidance of his new program director, it contained a hesitant, poorly articulated apology for the stair incident and the items he had stolen. Though far from complete reconciliation or true remorse, it was the first sign that perhaps, just perhaps, something positive might eventually emerge from the ashes of the relationship. Among the items later returned by Thomas Vance's office were several pieces of jewelry Leo had stolen, including a pearl necklace that belonged to my mother, a tangible, physical reminder that not everything had been permanently destroyed. Encouraged by this small sign of progress, I channeled my immense energy and revived professional purpose into the Vivian Holloway Scholars Initiative. Working with Professor Simon Wells and other trusted former colleagues, I developed and launched the inaugural programs for the Vivian Holloway Scholars Initiative. The programs were highly focused, designed specifically for the two vulnerable groups I now intimately identified with: troubled youth demonstrating early problematic behavioral tendencies, using education and mentorship as an alternative intervention, and elderly individuals seeking reinvention or educational resources after facing family abuse or financial exploitation. My own story, carefully anonymized and slightly fictionalized to protect current legal proceedings, became a powerful case study in an ethics course at the local, not convenient to name brand university. When I was invited to speak to the class as an expert consultant on the dynamics of elder financial abuse and emotional gaslighting, I found a new compelling vocation. I was no longer just a historian researching the past. I was actively shaping the future, educating young professionals, future doctors, lawyers, and financial planners about the subtle signs of familial exploitation and the importance of lifelong autonomy. During one such lecture, while discussing the critical difference between cognitive decline and intentional gaslighting, I noticed a familiar figure at the back of the lecture hall. It was Marcus. He sat quietly, dressed in a muted gray suit, observing intently. He didn't approach me during the break, and I didn't publicly acknowledge his presence. But his being there, his choice to attend a lecture on the ethical pitfalls that had consumed his life, suggested he might finally be starting the arduous process of true self-confrontation and understanding. It was a minimal gesture, but in the landscape of our broken relationship, it felt monumental. Meanwhile, Joyce Miller's health suddenly deteriorated. She was hospitalized with a serious, rapidly progressing prognosis. I immediately put my new foundation work on hold and remained at her bedside daily, returning the unwavering, fierce support she had given me in my darkest, most frightening moments. In this hospital setting, surrounded by the harsh realities of life's fragility and the finality of loss, I began to truly consider the meaning of forgiveness. Not as a gift to Marcus or Serena, who had done nothing to earn it, but as a release for myself, a necessary step to put down the heavy, exhausting weight of sustained bitterness and resentment. 6 months after the eviction, my life had found a complex, fulfilling new rhythm. My home, the elegant Victorian on Queen Anne, once an emotional battleground, was renovated and transformed. I removed the suffocating energy of the conflict, replacing it with spaces that reflected my own tastes and needs. One bedroom became a professional writing studio, where I finally resumed the large research manuscript on 19th century trade routes that Marcus had attempted to ruin. The Vivian Holloway Scholars Initiative was flourishing, having awarded its first 10 substantial scholarships to high school graduates and elderly community college applicants. I found deep, unparalleled satisfaction in helping both traumatized youth and elderly people seeking reinvention, both groups now defined by resilience rather than victimhood. Distinguished service to the community, read the citation as Mayor Thompson presented me with the not convenient to name brand Community Leadership Award for creating educational opportunities for vulnerable populations through the Scholars Initiative. Flashbulbs popped as I accepted the heavy crystal trophy, my first significant public recognition since the Foundation's establishment 9 months earlier. The irony was not lost on me. I had gone from being dismissed as a confused old woman facing institutionalization to receiving accolades before Seattle's educational and civic elite. My reclaimed dignity was now my public identity. The ultimate regret, the sorrow over the loss of my son, remained a dull ache, but it was no longer the defining force of my existence. I had successfully navigated the storm of familial betrayal, secured my autonomy, and transformed my pain into a powerful, lasting legacy of purpose. My story, Vivian Holloway's story, was now a testament to the fact that age is not frailty, that love should never be conditional upon compliance, and that even the most shattered lives can be rebuilt, piece by piece, into something stronger, more beautiful, and entirely their own. Vivian Holloway proved that age is no match for sharp strategy. She evicted her abusers and created a powerful legacy. Share your thoughts below and send your own story to womensstories@sugmail.com for a chance to be featured next.